Okay, so the final step of this, making this great, is going to be to texture it. So, the first thing that I'm going to need to do in order to texture this is just to get my UVs out of Max so that I can see what I'm doing. So to do that, we'll just go to Max, open the UV editor, tools, render UVW template, and then I'm going to render them out at 2K because that's what I'm doing my textures at. So render UV template and save that somewhere. I like to save it as a PNG as well, just so that you've got the transparency already in there, but it really doesn't matter what you save it as. Okay, so in Photoshop I've got my normal map that we baked out from the end of the last video, and I've got nDo2 open. The first thing that I'm going to do is to use nDo2 to draw in some of the things like the little screw holes and that kind of thing. So if I get up my piece of reference image, it's, well, okay, so we're going to be putting in, if we just have a look at this in Marmoset, then we need to put in details like these little rivets here, and obviously the slats in the wood as well. So these lines going through, we haven't got those in. I think that's about it for what we'll do in nDo2 for now. We could maybe, actually we'll put the text in as well. So I'll put this text in. Basically any surface detail that's altering the shape of the surface. Things like the grain of the wood, we'll put those in, we'll create that texture once or create that normal map detail once we've put the diffuse texture, the albedo texture on there. Okay, so back in Photoshop, first of all, let's get our UVs that we just got out. So just drag and drop those into Photoshop and just make sure that they're in the correct position. Okay. So these UVs are just going to be a bit of a guide for us to help us see where it is that we're putting our rivets and so on. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is unlock our background, our normal map background, so just double click on that. And we're going to use nDo2, so we need to convert this into the kind of normal map file that nDo2 likes to use. So what we want to do is to, first of all, if you remember in Marmoset 2, we needed to make sure that our Y was flipped. So in nDo2 we need to make sure that the Y is flipped as well. So that Y channel is just this green channel here. So all we're doing by flipping it is basically just doing that, just inverting it up and down. Okay, so we need to make sure that in nDo2, under File, Preferences, Flip Normal Channels, we need to make sure that the Flip Y is ticked, just so that nDo2 is working on the same basis as our renderer is. Once we've done that, we can make sure that you've got the normal map layer selected and go to convert, sorry, not convert, go to mix, and we want normal to nDo2, like that. and that's flipped our channel. Okay, so let's just flip that back. So just go to the green channel and flip that back. Okay, we'll save this as a Photoshop file as well. So let's call this crate NRM. I'm going to call this crate vid, actually, NRM. Let's just quickly open that in Marmoset 2. So, where are we? And just make sure that that's still working okay, and it does seem to be alright. So take off that ambient occlusion. Okay, so now what we can do is we can start to use nDo2, and as we're working, because we've got this PSD loaded into Marmoset 2, we can use Marmoset as a previewer. So if I create a new layer, if you haven't used nDo2 before, there's loads of videos on the Quixel website. I know nDo, all of the Quixel stuff is about to change probably a month or so after this video is made, so some of this stuff might be a little bit different, but the principles will still be the same. But if we add a new layer, what we can do is we can find areas like so we want to put some rivets down here, which is this bit here. So we can just get a brush for this, and we want to make sure that our brush is set to white. And now if I put in some, let me just make sure I've got the correct brush. So just use a standard hard round brush like this, and I can start to put in, just use these to dot in some of these rivets. Okay, I'm going to do those again, but just to show you what nDo will do, if I convert those now, so just hit convert, and I want to make sure that they, well, in this case I want them to slant up, so I want them to kind of stick out from the surface, and then you can just mess with these sliders. If you've never used nDo, I just recommend you do some tutorials for it to get an idea of what these sliders do. But I can just use these. We can maybe even do a groove like that, and that will get us, again, if we have a look at our reference, that's giving us that kind of shape there. Okay, so if I save this and come into Marmoset, then you can see that that's created that normal map. So this is a much easier way, a much easier way of doing this kind of detail. In fact, these are upside down, so I just need to make sure that those are slanted down. It's just because I'm using this groove, I think. They're going to go down and then in, like that shape there. So back to Marmoset, that's better. So yeah, this is a much easier way of doing this than modelling that detail in high poly and baking it down. You also get really clean results doing this using Marmoset 2. So I definitely, for anything like this, I definitely recommend Marmoset is the way to go. Okay, so let's just go back to Photoshop, and I'm just going to delete that whole group. and do that again a little bit neater. So I think again, I'm just looking at my reference as I'm doing this. I think my brush needs to be a bit smaller. And we've got a couple of rivets there and there. Then a couple at the bottom. And then these two are a little bit closer together, like that. And that. So convert. Again, I'm going to use that groove, and I'm going to make sure that my blend is set to overlay. So it's just overlaying over the normals that we bake down. Slant needs to be down for this. Let's increase the size a little. Can mess with these curves as well and see if that gets us something better. I'm going to stick with that, and the rest of these are okay. So let's take off our UVs, save that, and have a look. Okay, so again, that's our reference image, and to be honest, I should probably tweak these, make them a bit smaller, but for the sake of demonstrating, in fact there is something that I've done wrong with this. These should be over that side, so I will just redo them again actually. Okay, so I've just redone those and put them onto into the correct place now, and I think they're okay. So the next thing that we can do is these, to put in the actual kind of where the slats are here, so putting in these grooves along there and there. So that should be easy to do if we go into Photoshop again. And put on our UVs. So I believe this is the front of the front here, and this is the back. So all we need to do now is to make a new layer, and I can actually just use a brush again for this. So you can use anything you like. You can use a selection like this if you want and convert that, but in this case I think I'm just going to use a brush again. Oops. Get rid of that. So always make sure you use a new layer as well, and I'm just going to get a brush, get it about the right size, and I'm holding down Shift here to draw this in a straight line. And actually I just want it like that, about there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. So that's one. Actually, I think that might be a little... I think that might be a bit too wide. So there's one. This one's a bit lower. Maybe here. Oops. I'm just going to grab these and move them down a bit as well. So just get them into the correct position. And once I'm happy with that, then I can just use Alt and Shift and drag these down to the bottom. So now the lines on this should match up with the lines on the other side. So that's just the outside of the crate here, and then this one is the inside. I'll merge those two layers to keep it nice and clean. And what I actually want to do is, if we have a look at this, it's not totally a completely clean line. It's got a little bit of, it's a little bit bent, or a little bit sort of messy. There's a little bit of detail in there. It's not just a completely perfect straight edge. So we're going to try and put a bit of that in as well. Right, so to add a little bit of oops. So to add a bit of randomness to this, the first thing that I'm going to do actually is just to paint it a little bit freehand. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got that layer selected, and then I'm going to, in fact for now, I'm just going to delete these bottom ones because I'll just copy those down once I've sorted out the top. Oops. I can remember how to work Photoshop. So I'll delete those, and what I'm going to do is come in here with an eraser to start with, and I'm just going to actually start to delete some of this off here. So I'm purposefully doing this messy, if you like, because I want to add in a bit of randomness to the shape. So I don't want it to be too random. Okay, so that's the first one done. I'll do a similar thing to these other ones as well. Okay, so now we've got some more wobbly wood, which is probably better. And next I'm going to, so I've got a bit more randomness in this, which is going to help. But I also want to get a bit of the sort of the grain, and you see all of these little bits where it's just kind of chipped a bit out of the side. So to do that, I'm going to make a copy of this layer and keep this one just in case I mess something up. And actually I'm going to make another copy of that again. So I've got 2 fresh copies of this layer that we've just drawn in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top layer and I'm going to blur it a bit so that we get a softer edge, and then I'm going to use a filter to damage that edge so that it just breaks in and out a bit. That should make sense once I do this. So first thing I'm going to do is go to Filter, Blur, and I'm going to use Gaussian Blur, and about 3 pixels, something like that should be enough. So it's just a little blurred. So we'll OK that. And next I'm going to go, so I'm going to get that blurred layer, and then I'm going to go to filter at the top, and I'm going to go to render and fibers, and I'm going to turn my variance right down and my strength right up. Okay, so if I OK that, we'll get this kind of effect where it's basically just made that kind of random coming in and out. So that's going to help us get these some of the random edges and some of the sort of the way that the wood grain is breaking down at that point. So I think it's worth saying with this kind of thing as well that there's a load of ways that you could go about doing this. You might use the difference clouds, you might paint this by hand. All I'm doing is I'm using some of the effects in Photoshop to just mess with the line that I have. So you don't need to learn, you know, what you should do with this kind of thing is experiment yourself. So before I started recording this video, I worked out a way that would get me the effect that I wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhide the other copy of that layer and just bring it above. So now I've got this kind of thing here. And then I'm going to merge those two layers together. Okay, so I've just got one layer that looks like that, and I'm going to convert that using nDo2. I want to make sure that my blend is set to overlay. I want the slant to go down, obviously, because these are grooves that go inwards. I then want, I could maybe try changing my shape to chiseled, and then decrease the size a bit until I get something that I'm happy with. Maybe bring the depth right up. I want a bit of softness. Okay, I think, let's just bring the size up a little. Maybe a bit more softness as well. Okay, I'm going to try that, so I'm just going to save that and have a look in Marmoset, and this is what we've got. So you can see I've just got a bit of breakdown on the normal map where the wood is getting to the end edge. It gives the effect as though, it gives an effect almost as though you can see where it's been sawn. I would say I probably made these lines a little bit too wobbly now, so with a bit more time I should probably go and straighten those back up. This one's a little too thin as well, it's not quite working, so I might have to decrease the size a little, maybe increase my softness a bit more. I might try changing the smoothness, this shape to smooth as well. Let's see if that's any better. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so yeah, I've definitely, the lines that I drew, I probably went a bit overboard drawing those lines freehand. I just need to keep them a little bit straighter, but that's looking not too bad. I think the effect, the sort of feathering effect we've got at the edge works, that's alright. Maybe we'll try increasing the size again. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's pretty much the effect that I wanted. So let's just make sure now that we get this group and copy that down to the bottom as well. So that we've also got the inside done here. Okay, so we've done we should probably also do an edge here as well, but I'll leave that for now. But you can see that there's also a gap there. It just depends whether you want it to appear as though your metal is over the top. So at the moment I'm not too bothered about that because it looks as though my metal, the wood just carries on underneath that metal, which is okay for me. But ideally I should put in this edge as well, and that would just be a similar effect. We'd maybe want to use the fibers a bit more strongly to get that kind of effect here, to get some of these broken edges. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to do is to look at putting this text in, and then I think we'll be done with our normal map and we can go on to creating the diffuse. Okay, so to make the text, first thing I'm going to do is to start with a new layer. And that layer is going to be text, so we'll grab our text tool. Then I'm just going to type in the writing. Let me just make sure that my text is white as well. So this is what it says. If you're making this for a game, then obviously I would make sure that you come up with some fictional text for this, some fictional company that you can write on the side of it or something. This is what we've got. I would obviously try and get a font that matches as well as you can. I'm just going to use this one for now. I don't think it's not quite right, but it'll do for this. Okay, so once that's done, again, make sure that the text is done in white. Everything in nDo needs to be... Well, okay, so basically in nDo, if you draw something in... Okay, so I was saying that anything that's in white will be raised up, anything that's in black will be raised down, and anything that's in the middle at 128 will be completely neutral. So make sure that your text is white so that we can do something with it. Once you've done that, I would duplicate that layer just so that you've always got that text layer to go back to, and then you want to rasterize that one. So this is no longer text, this is just an image layer. Okay, so just to change that into a normal map, you could just hit convert, and that'll do that for you. But we don't want to do that straight away, because if we have a look at our text on here, there's a lot more going on with that text than it just being plain, you know, everything at the same depth. So we've got bits like here where the text isn't really very indented down. It's almost worn away to the surface. Particularly here is the same. And other little bits that are just breaking in and out. So I mean, that L, you can only really see that line there, and so we're not going to copy this exactly, but what we're going to do is to try and get a bit of that effect. Okay, so to make this easier to see what I'm doing, I'm going to, if I make this layer here invisible, or take the visibility off it, so the one with the little nDo symbol on it, then everything will go to grayscale and it makes it easy for me to see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is make a new layer, put it under the text, and I'm going to fill that with grey at 128. So that'll be a completely neutral grey. So what I want to do is I want this text to blend in and out of that kind of randomly. So there'll be areas where it's blended in like this, and then there'll be other areas where it's blended like that. So I'll just make a copy of the text again, and what I'm going to do is go to filter, and I'm going to render some difference clouds on this. Okay, so that will get me that effect where you can see some areas are a little bit more grey now and other areas are a bit more white. I'm just going to go to my levels now as well. So Control L to get your levels up, and then let's see if we can match this a bit better. So just by moving this middle one, all I'm trying to do, in fact I'm going to take my output levels and I'm going to put them to 128. That way I'm not going to have anything that's darker than the background is. Then I'm going to move this to try and blend that in and out. So you can see some areas like this P are almost invisible now. Okay, I think that'll do. And I'm going to make a duplicate of that, and this time I'm going to just blur that a little bit. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and about 2 will be fine, 2 pixels. And I'm going to do the same that we did for with the fibers on the side of the wood. So if I go to filter, render fibers, then I'll get that effect, but actually I want my fibers to be going from right to left, so horizontally rather than this. So to do that, I'm just going to rotate this first. So Control T to go to transform, and if you hold down Shift you can rotate it exactly 90 degrees. Then we can go filter, render, and render fibers, and that time now they're running the right way, so we can rotate this back. And I'm going to do a similar thing here, so I'm going to go to my levels, I'm going to take it up to 128, and then I'm just going to have a little bit of this coming through. Okay, so then this one can go above our fibers, and then finally, in fact that's all we need. Okay, so that text is set up now and ready to go. I'm just going to merge that, and I'm merging it with this grayscale, this grey layer that I made as well. So I'm merging all of those together. In fact, I'm just going to duplicate those first, because I just like to keep copies of everything. So I can put those into a folder actually, and just call that, I don't know, raw text or something. And then I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to convert it in nDo2, and we want to, let's just turn our normal map layer back on, and I want to make sure that the blend is an overlay, and I want the slant to be downwards. I want the size to be quite low on this, I think. We can do an inner, that's fine. Smooth is fine. So maybe increase the fall off a bit. So you can see the normal map for some of these letters and some of these part of the letters is almost completely worn out now. Let's just save that and have a look in set, and that's about right. I think the text is generally a bit too thick, a bit too wide in this, so I should have used just a smaller font. But you can see we've got that effect where some of the text is quite worn out. So bits like this U are almost not indented at all, whereas other bits are quite heavily indented. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so the final stage of this, I'm going to say that normal map is done. So what we want to do is because we've added some stuff to this normal map down, in fact I'm just going to reduce the depth on these a little bit, I think. So we've got our ambient occlusion, but our ambient occlusion hasn't got the detail that we've just put in nDo. So what we can do is we can use nDo, and if we go to convert and from a normal map to a AO, so make sure normal is ticked there, AO is ticked here, and we're doing it on the active document. So we can bake down a ambient occlusion straight out of nDo, which is one of the really powerful features of nDo2. And we've got the ambient occlusion now for the bits that we've just put in. So I would generally say we don't need too much of this fine shadow. Really it's just a case of messing with these settings until you get something that you're happy with, but bear in mind that you already have the ambient occlusion that we baked down in XNormal. So we're just trying to get a little bit of detail to add to that. Okay, so I'm going to go with that, and then once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to merge that group. Control A to select all of it, and then Control C to copy. This is my ambient occlusion in here. So I'll paste that over the top, and I'm going to set that to a multiply. Okay, so that's just adding that detail over the top of the ambient occlusion we already have. I'm also going to come in here and I'm going to convert to a cavity as well. And I'll take all of the cavity map and I'll also paste that over the top of the AO, and this one I'll set to a overlay. Okay, I'll save that into a new file, so we'll call that, instead of create vid norm, we'll call that create vid AO. Save, and we can put that for now into our albedo just to see what that's doing. Okay, so that's our ambient occlusion in there as well, and you can see we're definitely on the way now to creating our texture for this. So the next thing to do is going to be to actually add in texture. So put a metal texture over the metal, put a wood texture over the metal, over the wood, then start to paint in rust. So this video has been quite long now, so I'll stop this here, and I will do I'll paint this up in the last video.